The Light of Burning Shadows, Book 2 of the Iron Elves, by Chris Evans. Narrated by Michael Kramer. Copyright 2009 by Chris Evans. This unabridged audiobook is published by arrangement with Pocket Books, a division of Simon & Schuster, Incorporated, and was produced in the year 2009 by Tantor Media, Incorporated, which holds the copyright thereto. Dedication. For Nat Schurn, World War II veteran of the North African, Sicilian, and Italian campaigns, old New Yorker in the grandest sense, and my friend. You are missed. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow. Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae, M.D., in Flanders Fields. The Light of Burning Shadows. Issue number 4372, Imperial Weekly Herald, Solace Day, 12th of Sextanth, is now published every Moon Day, Odd Day, and Solace Day morning by T.R. Ramshield & Company, 79 Unicorn House, Ildar Street, Selwyn. 1/2 gold coin per annum, payable quarterly in advance, and is distributed throughout the Empire by the Royal Dispatch Corps and the News Crier and Courier Service of Daffold and Daffold Company. In this, the 47th year and 239th day of Her Majesty the Queen's blessed reign over the Calahrian Empire. A dispatch received from the field written by Her Majesty's scribe Raleigh St. John. Port Gamjal, Elfkina. The Iron Elves fight again. Major Kanawa Swift Dragon distinguishes himself on the field of battle. Elements of the Imperial Army prove victorious against forces aligned against the Empire. The fabled Red Star of the East returns. A second Viceroy falls from grace. The Shadow Monarch casts her noxious spell. Forests most foul. Lugath Jor is saved. The Iron Elves sail forth in a daring gambit to stamp out evil wherever it builds a lair. Honor restored. Through the magnificent exertions of the once more proud and honorable Iron Elves, and under the command of His Majesty Prince Tychon, these stalwart warriors wearing the imperial silver-green met and defeated the most wicked of creatures controlled by the Elf Witch, the Shadow Monarch, in pitched battle. Most stunning of the many exceptional events that unfolded was the return to this world of the fabled Red Star, known in these parts as the Star of Silra. In an act of supreme graciousness, Prince Tychon allowed the star to remain and grow in Elfkina as a beacon of strength and purity, thwarting the works of dark elements. March into battle. Major Kanawa Swift Dragon, formerly Colonel Kanawa Hier Ul Osvin, as previously reported, has once again resumed his rightful place as an honored and respected officer in the service of the Empire. Recently restored to active duty, Major Swift Dragon wasted no time in reconstituting the regiment he once led so proudly, the Iron Elves. Though no longer composed of elves, the regiment nonetheless retains the traditions and, most importantly, the battle skills of its previous incarnation, and has acquitted itself well in the field. In an act surely to go down in the annals of history, the soldiers of the Iron Elves took a blood oath infused with magic of unknown powers to serve their regiment and the Empire unto death and beyond. Never has such an oath been taken, but then never has such a regiment strode forth into danger against such overwhelming odds. What repercussions such an oath carries only time will tell. Inspired actions. Having received his orders from the Prince, Major Swift Dragon led the brave soldiers of the reformed Iron Elves to the embattled outpost of Lugath Jor to relieve the 35th Foot Guard. Alas, a forest of black intent had taken root there, the hand behind its design none other than the Shadow Monarch. Finding the garrison lost, the Iron Elves immediately set to the task of restoring order. Though outnumbered, the Iron Elves never faltered, though the battle lasted through the day and night. With inhuman strength, creatures of shadow and darkness threw themselves against the Iron Elves' wall of bayonets. Each time Major Swift Dragon was there, His sabre, a gift from his friend, Colonel of the 14th Household Cavalry, and officer commanding Her Majesty's cavalry in Elfkina, the Duke of Rakestraw, whistling through the air as the enemy fell before him. Musketry crackled like dropped crystal as the soldiers fired volley after volley until their eyes were red and their throats parched from the smoke. Though they were hard-pressed, these brave warriors did not break. Again and again, rocks. Yes, dear readers, the rumors you have heard are true. The great hairy beasts of fang and claw, long thought hunted to extinction, have returned. Flung themselves on the line, but each time they were repulsed. Tales of Elfkinans in league with these creatures are patently false. By the end of the battle, all peoples of the Empire, Elfkinan, human, elf, and dwarf, stood shoulder to shoulder as they fought the Shadow Monarch's forces. Courage abounds. For his actions at Lugoth-Jor, Major Swift-Dragon was to be commended and awarded the Silver Sword for Bravery Medal by the Queen herself at the palace in Selwyn, a most deserved acknowledgment of his actions. However, Prince Tychon, expressing his regrets, has ordered the Iron Elves and other elements of the Imperial Army and Navy to immediately set sail and scour the high seas for any sign of the Shadow Monarch's creatures, and destroy any enemy lodgements they find. Sightings of forests of a most dark and unhealthy nature by merchant shipping suggest the Shadow Monarch is making a play for the islands in the Onmeden Sea. This cannot stand, and thus the Iron Elves, so recently bloodied in fierce contest with the enemy, will once again take up the quarrel with the foe and smite it down. The fallen are honored. Memorial service for the 35th Foot Guard to be held in Triumph Park this coming week. The roll will be read, and family members of the deceased may place a rose or other suitable flower on the site of the future monument to be dedicated in their honor. Wanted for high treason. By royal proclamation be it known that Fultonald Elkhart Gwyn, former Viceroy for the Protectorate of Greater Elfkina, is hereby stripped of all titles, honors, awards, and other distinctions, and is considered a most vile and contemptible man. His capture, prosecution, and execution is paramount, and any persons aiding in his being brought to justice will be eligible for a reward of not less than 100 gold coins. Any persons known to give aid and comfort to this traitor will share his decidedly dark fate. Lottery of the Stars. The Royal Mint, in conjunction with the Soldiers' Benevolent Fund, has launched a lottery open to all citizens of the Empire to wager a guess as to where and when the next star will fall. The person or persons guessing both date and place correctly will receive 1/3 of the funds collected, with the remaining 2/3 going to the care and treatment of wounded soldiers, or, in the case of their death, their families. In addition, the Royal Mint is proud to announce it will begin striking a collector's series of coins commemorating each star as it reveals itself. 1. There were 2 of him now, and neither one knew which was sane. He stood atop the ridgeline running the length of the island and waited for the sun to drown. The ocean darkened. Shadows bled up the windward slope toward him. Bodies, pierced by the trunks of obsidian trees, became shrouded in the gloom. The smell of putrefying flesh fled as the heat of the day leached from the air. It was as if nothing had happened here. No horrors to relive, no nightmares to endure. He might have believed that, if not for the screams in his head. They echoed in the space between what he was and what he was becoming. Here now he stood in a world where the sun was setting and a cool ocean breeze was worrying the sawgrass behind the dunes of the beach. Only the unhurried slide of waves over sand and the distant shouts and forced laughter of men from the shore party filled the air. But he also stood here now, where the screams of the dead still rasped from blood-red throats. Only yesterday the trees of the Shadow Monarch had flourished in this place, feeding on all they found as her forest continued to expand across the known world. Frostfire burned to life in his hands. He did nothing as it arced to the steel and wood of his musket, setting it afire in cold black flame. He brought a hand close to his face, mesmerized. This was power and curse, the union of the Iron Elves' blood oath with her magic. The flames climbed higher, and he staggered. There was a price for this. The gulf between his polar selves widened each time he called upon this newfound power. In his mind, the outstretched limbs of the Shadow Monarch's forest inched a little closer. He knew it had to stop. The last rays of the sun vanished into the sea. Dark forms rose from the lengthening shadows surrounding him. Dead hands reached out. He recognized the fallen, and they did not frighten him. One-Eyed Mary, killed by dog spiders. Alec and Buuko, struck down by rocks, and the Shadow Monarch's dark elves. Regimental Sergeant Major Lorien, sitting tall on the horse Zwindara, both felled in the battle at Lugothjor. And so many others. Join us. He eased the hammer back on his musket. A charge and ball already rested inside. He turned the musket so that the muzzle rested firmly over his heart. Frostfire danced along the metal in anticipation. It would take but one squeeze of the trigger, but what would he end, and what would begin? Join us. He wanted to believe that all the pain, the fear, the terrifying rage, the nightmares that stalked his sleep, all would sink into a cold abyss. The shades of those that had gone before beckoned him, but their voices trembled with a pain he could only guess at. Could it be worse than what he lived with now? One final act on his part, and he would find out. His finger tightened on the trigger. "There you are," Sergeant Yimpt Arkhorn said, trudging up the slope. The dwarf's voice boomed like a cannon in the cooling night air. "I wouldn't have thought it possible to lose someone in this wee pebble of an island, but you just about managed it. You don't want to be hanging around this sad lot," he said, casting a hand toward the blackened husks of trees and the dead. If the dwarf saw the shadows, he said nothing. Private Alwyn Renoir lowered his musket as the frost surged briefly before guttering out. He slowly turned to face the dwarf. "5 islands in a row," Yimpt said, huffing to a stop beside him on top of the ridge. He hoisted his shatterbow up to his shoulder, hooking one of the curved arms over it so that the double-barreled weapon hung down across his broad back. He reached to his side and grabbed his wooden canteen, first offering it to Alwyn, who shook his head. "Suit yourself, but it helps your eyeballs," he said, referring to Alwyn's need for spectacles. Yimpt upended the canteen and gulped several mouthfuls of a liquid, most certainly not water, as the pungent vapors drifted into the night air. Wiping his mouth with the back of his sleeve, Yimpt deftly stuffed a wad of croûte, the rock spice the dwarf was forever chewing, between his cheek and metal-colored teeth. 5 islands of nothing but black misery. I understand the need to weed these foul trees before they really take root, but why is it always us? I'll tell you this, Allie. If his arseness the prince orders us to one more dust speck in the middle of the ocean, I might just risk the noose and kick the bugger right where his top and bottom halves meet. And with a running start. A smile, Alwyn thought. I know I should smile. Alwyn took a deep breath and let it out, forcing his shoulders to relax and doing his best to reassure. "I can see you're wasting no time in trying to lose those sergeant's stripes," he said. Yimpt patted his arm and traced a finger around the recently sewn-on stripes of his uniform. "These aren't what make a dwarf, Allie. Though I got to admit I'm being a bit more protective of them this time round. Someone's got to keep their head." "You're saying Major Swiftdragon isn't?" Yimpt rolled his eyes. "The Major's spitting musket balls. The Prince is a hair's breadth from his last breath if he keeps sending us to these cursed islands, instead of straight on to the desert wastes of the Hashugeb Expanse. Now, just between you and me, I'm starting to wonder a bit about the Major. He's getting a bit frantic to find the first Iron Elves. Course I can see his point. Be nice to have some reinforcements with all this going on, he said, again waving a hand around them. Oh, I swear by the dew of a freshly laundered nun the Major's going to do the Prince harm. Would that be so terrible? Alwyn said. But the wind picked up just then, and Yimpt kept talking as if he hadn't heard. Our Major is a kettle on full fire with half an ounce of water inside. We visit another island, and the line of succession to the throne will be shorter by 1. Yimpt pointed a hand out to sea. Not that it'll matter a cauldron of newts if this Shadow Monarch and stars business keeps up. Like there ain't enough pain and suffering in the world already without someone wanting to take the whole bloody thing over and make it worse. Where's the sense in that? Alwyn answered before he could stop himself. Maybe she doesn't see it that way. Maybe she's in pain none of us can understand, and this is her way of trying to deal with it. People don't think straight when they're hurting. For her, the Red Star offered a chance to change things. He didn't add that the Red Star also offered a chance for the blood oath the Iron Elves had taken to be broken, a chance that was lost at Lugath Jor. Yimpt spat out a stream of croot which sizzled in the sand. Odd way of looking at it, Allie. But even if that's true, and I don't buy it, then all the more reason to find the first Iron Elves, get a mess of axes and go pay a visit to her little mountain. More stars are bound to come tumbling down, and she's going to keep trying to get her hands on every one until she's stopped. She's already brought back rocks. Heaven knows what else she'll find. Alwyn feared and hated the rocks. They were massive, hideous creatures with fangs and claws and milky white eyes. But what truly made them horrific was that they were brought back from extinction with only killing as their purpose. That the Shadow Monarch might bring back creatures worse than that added a whole new layer to his nightmares. "But what of the oath we took?" Alwyn asked. "Her magic wove its way into it. We have power unlike anything else. I can do things, Yimpt, that I don't want to be able to do. We weren't meant to have this kind of power, and she's behind it. Can't you feel things changing?" The Shadow Monarch was ever present in Alwyn's dreams, forever calling to him. He couldn't hold out forever. None of them could. "Changing?" Yimpt lifted up the hem of his cairna and scratched at his thigh while he pondered the question. "I tried warming a cup of ore the other day between my hands, you know, calling up a bit of the frost fire. All I managed to do was light my beard on fire, and the ore was colder than when I started." "You're making fun of me," Alwyn said. "Yimpt should understand. He took the oath as well." "Don't get your cairna in a twist," Yimpt said, smiling at him. "I just don't think it's as bad as you make out. Sure, we might be doomed to eternal service in the afterlife, but if we're still serving, then we can't exactly be afterlife, see? I'll tell you this, Allie. Having already put in a few decades in Her Majesty's employ, traipsing hither and yon about the Empire, visiting smelly little villages with nasty little people chucking all kinds of sticks and stones and spells at you, I have to say, it ain't that bad. Personally," Yimpt said, changing his scratching to his beard, "I can see some upsides." Alwyn looked out to sea and tried to find the view Yimpt saw there. "Come on, Allie. We can chaw this over back at camp. Doesn't do a fellow any good to be out alone in a place like this. What were you doing up here, anyway?" Alwyn shook his head. "Nothing. I just came up here for a walk and to get some fresh air. Mr. Coy says I need to keep in motion to get the stump used to the new leg." Just a month ago, a black arrow crafted by a dark art and wielded by an even darker creature had pierced his thigh. In an effort to save his life, Alwyn lost more than his leg that night. "And Miss Red Owl says I need to keep active so that I don't dwell on things. She's teaching me meditation," Yimpt cast an appraising eye at Alwyn's wooden leg. Both Vicina Tukoi and Chei Red Owl had crafted it from a living tree, magically entwining several slender branches into an intricate and flexible design. Yimpt stepped closer and looked up, locking eyes with him. "Aye. Couple of witchy women there, they ought to know. Wise to heed them, Allie. They only want what's best for you."
"Yes, I suppose you're right,"
Alwyn said, trying to believe it. Around him the shades still waited. The shadow of Mary moved closer, his one eye like a dark portal offering Alwyn a path far away from here, though Alwyn knew Yimpt couldn't understand. "I'm always right," Yimpt said, thumping his chest. "In fact, if I was a betting man, I'd say the two of them joined us on our little sailing adventure as much for you as for the Major. I figured they'd stay back in Elfcoina with the rest of those long watch elves to look over the tree star thing in Lugath Jaw. But I think you've become a bit of a project."
"A project?"
Yimpt nodded. "Aye. See, women, no matter their age or race or even how witchy they are, like to work on projects, and by projects I mean men. The more screwed up or in need of repair the man is, the happier womenfolk are. And Allie, between you and the Major, I'd say those ladies have got their hands full for a long time to come."
"You always know just what to say," Alwyn said, not sure if he should be touched or offended by the idea.
Where Yimpt was concerned, it was always a close-run thing. Shrugging, Alwyn began to turn around to head back down the slope. Yimpt reached out and grabbed him by the elbow, stopping him. He gently took the musket from his hands and eased the hammer back into place, then handed it back to Alwyn. "A fellow wants to be careful with a loaded weapon, especially out here." For a moment there was only Yimpt, his friend, on the ridgeline with Alwyn. He looked into the dwarf's eyes and saw the concern.
"I'll try to remember that,"
Alwyn said. Yimpt beamed, flashing his metal-colored teeth. "Not to worry, Allie, not to worry. As long as Sergeant Arcorn's around, you'll have me to remember it for you. We've got some serious glory and gallantry ahead of us, and I sure as hell ain't about to face it alone. A fellow can only wear so many medals afore folks start to think he's a bit full of himself, you know. Now get a move on. I got a turtle roasting on the fire. At least I think it's a turtle. And you want to eat it while it's still warm."
Alwyn smiled this time, a real smile. "Then get down there and save me a piece. I never miss a chance to try some of your cooking. I try, but unfortunately I never miss."
Yimp raised one bushy eyebrow and wagged a thick finger at him. "Cheeky bugger," he said, turning and heading down the slope. "I'll save you some of the brains. You can never have too many."
Alwyn watched him for a while until the shadows closed in again. Mary came to stand beside him. "Join us, Alwyn." The others joined in, urging him on. "Join us."
Alwyn gripped his musket, but this time no frost fire danced along it. He started to limp down toward the campfire, the pain in his stump reminding him with each step of what he had already lost, but also of what still remained. The shadows on the ridgeline did not follow, but kept their hands outstretched.
"Not yet," Alwyn said back to them. "Not yet."
2. Major Konawa Swiftdragon, second in command of the Calahrian Empire's Iron Elves, stood on the bow of his small boat in the pre-dawn darkness, regretting his decision to eat before setting out for Wakama Island. His stomach roiled. Each surge and wallow of the boat acted like a punch to his gut. Sweat drenched his face and stung his eyes, making it hard to see, though in this darkness it made little difference.
Someone, or more specifically, something on the island ahead of them, was going to pay for his suffering. He stood up a little straighter and spat into the wind. "Damn it." He wiped off his face and lowered his shoulder. Lanterns, wrapped in heavy canvas and hung from iron pikes, gave off a feeble orange glow, illuminating the boat and its complement of sailors and Iron Elves. Kanawa cursed the need for any light at all, but the men in the boat did not have elven eyes. Looking beyond the boat, he could just make out their starting point, Her Majesty's 72-gun ship-of-the-line Black Spike. If all went well, they would be back on her decks by nightfall. Kanawa returned his gaze forward. Somewhere ahead of them lay Wakama Island, the last and southernmost in a chain of 7 islands in the Onmadan Sea, stretching between Elfkina and the Hashugeb Expanse. The previous 6 islands had been, for lack of a better word, infested with the Shadow Monarch's growing forest. The small populations that had lived on the islands, mostly fishermen and their families, had been slaughtered by her forest, leaving not a man, woman, or child alive. Each island was a sun-drenched horror, and Kanawa grew angrier with every gruesome discovery. This had to stop. He had to take the fight directly to the Shadow Monarch. For Kanawa, that meant finding the original Iron Elves and marching straight to her mountain. That she wanted the original elves for her designs as she wanted Kanawa made it all the more crucial Kanawa find them first. The power he wielded was incredible, and he was the least magical elf that had ever set foot in a forest. Even some of the human soldiers showed a knack for using the frost fire, albeit with haphazard results. While the power of the Blood Oath bound every soldier in the regiment, its magical properties resided primarily with its only remaining elf, Kanawa. Imagining what the Shadow Monarch could do with a highly trained regiment of elves completely under her control made even Kanawa shudder. The bow of the boat dipped and took a wave over the top, spraying Kanawa from head to foot.
"Damn it all to hell!"
"War is no excuse for language like that, my son," Chei Red Owl said. "And we are but 3 bowshots distance from the island. You really should get down from there." A snigger, a muffled giggle, even an innocent cough would have launched Kanawa at the throat of the unlucky person, but not one gave any indication that he had heard Kanawa being scolded by his mother. There were 5 boats currently being rowed toward the island, and of course it was Kanawa's luck that his vessel had his mother on board.
"Uncork your musket, unwrap the firelock, and prepare to fire," Kanawa said from the bow, deliberately ignoring his mother's advice. The soldiers reacted instantly, well-versed now in the drill after having stormed 6 islands before. They knew from experience that things would happen fast. "Sergeant Arkhorn, ready your cannon." Each boat was equipped with a small 6-pounder cannon strapped to the bow with ropes facing forward. It wasn't subtle, but then again neither were rocks. "Aye, sir, ready and waiting," the dwarf said, giving the barrel of the cannon a solid slap with the palm of his hand. "The beasties will know what hit him, but not for long." Beside him, Private Renoir peered down the length of his musket, his hands rock-steady. Kanawa had made it known to the sergeant that Renoir need not join them on the island assaults on account of his wooden leg. Surprisingly, Chei had objected, though she had refused to elaborate. Kanawa had also tried to bring the subject up with Vicina, but talking with her was even more frustrating. They agreed on nothing. Not the use of the Shadow Monarch's power, not the role the Empire played in the world, and definitely not how to set things right again. Naturally, Vicina agreed with Chei about Private Renoir, but the point was moot as Renoir volunteered for every attack. Kanawa was happy to have him along. Kanawa had thought Renoir too fragile for soldiering, but the private was proving to be a fierce warrior, charging the beach with exceptional bravery and never once holding back despite his significant impairment. The boat lurched and one set of oars rode air for a moment. Kanawa stumbled and grabbed hold of the cannon before righting himself. It took a greater effort to keep the contents of his stomach.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?